Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Lam here. In today's Fuji Friday, we're going to be talking about the X-T4 again, and maybe some expectations for the X-H2 if that camera were ever to come out. But the full specs leaked for the X-T4, so I went ahead, went through all of it, and I wrote down kind of what I wanted to talk about, and the list actually turned out to be a lot longer than I expected. So let's go ahead and talk through what I wrote down. The first thing I wrote down is the price, of course. At $1,700, I think that it still represents pretty good value. It's still below the sub 2000, which is kind of where the entry-level full frames are sitting right now. So it's really good to be under that mark. $1,500 was the original price of the X-T3, and everybody thought that was a pretty good price, and I've definitely gotten that value out of my camera system because we've been using it since day one, and it's been hard used and it's been going really well. So an extra $200 for the Ibis system, better battery life, upgrades in the LCD and the viewfinders, definitely worth it. And there's a lot of things to talk about here. So I do think it's well worth the price. And of course, it's going to start bumping down the price of the X-T3, especially in the used markets, which is really great because if you don't need things like a bigger battery or the Ibis technology, then the X-T3 might be a really worthwhile purchase used because it's going to start falling below $1,000 and you're going to get a really great camera. The next thing that I wrote down on my list is the ability to generate TIFFs instead of just JPEGs. This is kind of a good, I don't know, maybe a small upgrade because JPEGs have been around for quite a long time and TIFFs just gives you a little bit more bit depth at 16 bits. So it's definitely an overall improvement. But honestly, I wish the technology that we're exporting to would kind of increase a little bit further than just going with TIFFs, but it's still an overall better improvement. So definitely look out for that. The next thing to talk about, of course, is going to be the Ibis or Embody stabilization. And we can look forward to 6.5 stops of stabilization, which is really great. The XH1 could get up to 5.5 stops, so we're seeing a 1-stop improvement, so that's really great news. Whether or not it's going to be able to compete with a camera like a GH5, I don't really know yet, but it's definitely worth finding out. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how well the image stabilization works. There is also digital image stabilization in this camera. But one thing to note on this is that while they did tout there is digital image stabilization, they didn't really say anything on whether or not the camera has a gyro. This is really important because the gyro definitely helps digital image stabilization. If there is no gyro inside the X-T4, it's not going to be as good as what we see on the X-T200. So that's definitely something to note and to test for once I get the X-T4 in my hands. The next item to talk about is the bigger battery, which is great. It looks like it's just about double the size of the normal batteries that we're currently using, which is great. So they're saying that they're going to see run times of 110 minutes continuous for 4K video. That's pretty amazing considering that I usually get 35 to 40 minutes of record time continuous on my X-T3. If we can triple that, that would be pretty stellar and definitely a worthwhile upgrade right there. Now, these are the written down reported numbers, and they might be very optimistic numbers, which they usually are when it comes to runtime. But still, with double the battery size, I do expect double the runtime at the very least. So if I get that, I still be very happy, but I definitely want to test that. A lot of times we really don't get what's actually written down for video purposes. Definitely really want to test this out before I say it's true or not. Going along with the battery life, they did upgrade the USB-C port to a PD protocol, so that's power delivery, and that means that your batteries will charge faster, which also means that if you have a battery bank plugged up to your X-T4, it should be able to run the camera indefinitely. At least that's what I'm hoping for, not having to buy additional batteries, and they're generally very expensive, so I'm really looking forward to again testing that out. Moving on to the next subject, which is video recordings, and there's some really good news here, and then there's some news that I wish were better. So at 4K, we still have a record limit of 30 minutes. This is something that's a little bit mind-boggling on why we still have that. I'm not sure if it's a heat limit or if there's just a restriction on it, but by this point, we really shouldn't have a record limit on our XT cameras because there is no additional sales tax. At least that's what I'm being led to believe. So I kind of wish they would just get rid of the 4K record limit. This could be heat related, in which they don't want to overheat the cameras, but there are temperature sensors inside of all of these cameras and they automatically turn off once they hit a certain temperature. So I'm not really sure why they still have a record limit. Maybe there's an error in terms of what they wrote down, but I certainly hope they don't have any record limits. They didn't say anything about 1080p record limits, so there might not be any record limits here. The really good news here is that we're getting a new version of slow motion, which is we can now go to 240p slow motion, which is great because we're essentially doubling what we had with the X-T3, and the X-T3 had really great slow motion. There is a record limit of 3 minutes, which is great. Actually, somebody was telling me that in the comments below that this feature was coming. I didn't believe it, but you know what? It's really cool that it's here, and I'm glad that he's right, and I hope he gets to enjoy that feature. One thing that I do want to say is the X-T4 does have a slightly larger buffer size, which is really great for photos and videos, but really for slow motion, I think the reason why it's capable of doing something like this is because the SD card slots are actually writing faster to the SD card. So I think the X-T4 is definitely taking advantage of the V90 cards. This is something that's really important because if you don't have V90 cards, because they tend to be really expensive, you definitely will want to upgrade to them if you want to take advantage of that slow motion, because I have a feeling that if you have slow cards, you're really not going to be able to take advantage of some of these video features. A couple of final things to talk about before wrapping up this video. The next thing to talk about is the autofocus is going to be more sensitive at low light. The X-T3 was at -3 EV. The X-T4 promises to be at -6 EV, which is great because it's basically doubling the low light sensitivity. So for anybody who's taking pictures indoors or in low light situations, you should see an improvement in your autofocusing, which is really great news overall because a lot of us do take pictures when there's not a whole lot of sunlight out. And the last thing to talk about on my list is there is 2 new film simulations coming to the X-T4, the Classic Negative, which came out with the X Pro 3, and they also have a Eterna Bleach Bypass, which I don't really know what that means. I'm definitely looking forward to actually seeing some pictures of this Eterna Bleach Bypass. It sounds like it has something to do with creating a flatter image for cinematography, but that's only my guess. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that on the 25th or 26th of February. But that was a really long list of things that have improved on the X-T4 for an additional $200. I do think it's actually a worthwhile upgrade. If I was a working professional, I would definitely sell my X-T3 and upgrade to an X-T4 because I do think it's really worthwhile. If you're a working professional with multiple X-T3, and I know a couple of people that do that, I would definitely sell one of my X-T3s and go with an X-T4 as my primary camera. And then professional lenses like the 16-55 f2.8 all of a sudden has image stabilization, which will really stretch out what you can do with that lens, which would be super great. So it's definitely going to be really great for anybody who uses a lot of lenses in the Fuji lineup without any optical image stabilization. That's all I have this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.